Where do I sign?
Yeah. All right.
Wicked.
Okay. So,
Cool. So question 1, who is Weldon Lister?
you know, that's a great question that we've been trying to find the answer to since they named my dad that.
Yeah.
Oh, your dad was named Weldon as well?
He actually was.
Okay.
And so we named my son that.
Yeah.
Weldon III. Yeah. So I actually knew that you were going to ask this question, so I thought a lot about it. And I still don't have a decent answer. So that's the scary part.
Yeah.
So who is Weldon? Interestingly talented individual who does work with his hands, and a guy who's very fortunate to get to do what he loves to do almost every day.
That's a pretty good summation of it.
Yes.
I'd like that. And you've also just said that you're a very talented person, which is the first time in all the time we've spent with you that you've admitted that you're a talented guy.
Darn.
You've done it, and we've got it on record. We have it immortalised digitally.
Great.
Which is the first time that you've admitted it.
That's why you have edit. That's why you have that delete button. So, okay, let me, all right. A moderately talented person who gets to do what they love to do by the grace of many clients who like what I do, love what I do, and are willing to wait for it. And so that's the amazing part. I mean, I think I'm probably much like any craftsman who does work with their hands, in that when I start working on whatever it is, it's almost amazing. I mean, I love it. And when I'm actually engraving something, I feel like a kid, you know, unwrapping something at Christmas and you're just waiting to see what's in the box. And, you know, it's so much fun. And I've expressed this a couple of times before. My philosophy on life is I believe God gives us all different gifts. And when we figure out what that area of giftedness is and we work in that, it's not like working, it's just doing what we're made to do. Yeah. And so I had the luxury of growing up around a dad who was very artistic and did a lot of things like that. And so I was exposed to that sort of thing. I mean, working with your hands. As a carpenter, as a leather craftsman, an engraver, a musician, all of that stuff. And so it wasn't foreign to me. It was something I grew up around.
Yeah.
And from the time that I was about 6, my dad was a professional engraver, working in a shop where there were other engravers, working with hammer and chisel. And so on school holidays or during the summer vacation, I would go to work with my dad. And so it was no big deal for me to walk into the shop and see, you know, 3 or 4 guys at vices much like I have. We've all got vices, you know. Anyway, so these guys were standing there working and tapping on a hammer, you know, engraving something. So I go, "Hey, Dad, what are you working on?" "Oh, well, here, take a look." And so as a 6 or 7-year-old kid, I'm there, at his vice. Really talented, you know, almost fell over. So I would be looking at what he was doing, and I remember looking at engraving before I knew how to engrave and sort of seeing an overall thing. And then I contrast that with learning how to engrave and looking at it from the inside out and seeing what makes it be what it is. And so it's a big difference, or there was to me anyway. But even as a kid, you know, I was around it, I enjoyed it, and I don't know, it seemed normal. So I think to a degree, whatever our dads do when we're growing up is kind of what we, you know, consider to be normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's not like, wow, this is weird. My dad's an engraver. I don't know what to do, you know. It's just like, whatever. That's what he does, you know.
Yeah, you know, Shannon and Bill talked about exactly this, the oysters, because their kids grew up in the store because they were at the height of their business. You know, they're building rods, and this is the first time it really sunk into me. I was like, their kids are going to grow up and be like, do you know some people's parents go to an office to work and sit in a cubicle?
Yeah.
Like, and you forget that that's not the norm everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doing, like, being around what you've been around, the cubicle thing must have just seemed so out of the norm.
Yeah, it's pretty much why I never wanted to do that. You know, my mom did. My mom worked for a major insurance company in San Antonio.
Right.
And so that was her job. But that's what she did. That was all, that was good for her. And she would say she wasn't creative. She really was, but she sandbagged a bit.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so I think that for me, it was normal to see my dad building things. In my mind, he could do anything. Mm-hmm. And he was one of those guys who could visualize something in his, what he would call his mind's eye, and then do it, whether it was wood carving or engraving something or building something or whatever. So he had this really cool 3D imagination with all of the, extra add-ons that, and not everybody's got that.
No.
And so it's a necessity, in my opinion, if you're going to sculpt anything. Engraving per se, which is, cutting metal with a chisel, cutting out metal, it is, two-dimensional, but it's not necessarily three-dimensional. The way that you shade it and trick the eye can make it appear to be three-dimensional. But when you start subtractive work, when you're taking away and sculpting things and making something look like an animal in a shape or a face of a person, those are difficult things to do. So you have to know what that's going to look like while you're taking away the parts that don't look like that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know which sculptor it was from the Renaissance. It's a quote from someone great. I think Michelangelo actually said it. There's hecklers here. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but there's a heckler over there in the corner. paid heckler. And anyway, he said, well, how do you carve that? We'll just take away everything that doesn't look like what it is, and you've got it. So it's pretty much what it is. But in that process, you need to be able to see, because as you're subtracting all of those elements, it really looks bad in phases.
Okay.
And so it can't look good all the time because you're removing it. It's sort of like, us, when we go through life, sometimes the end product looks really good. Mm-hmm. But to get to that point in our life, we go through a lot of pommeling and, pain and, work to get there. So the process may not be the prettiest thing, but the end result is. And it takes that effort to get there. And so my point, even though it's belabored a bit, is you need that imagination. You need to be able to see those things in your mind. And some people can't do that.
Was that hard when you were starting out to see beautiful finished parts and then see at some point the artworks look great and then it's going really rough to get to that? That feels like that would be a point where a lot of people would down tools and be let's start again.
Okay, no, that's a great question, because you're right. And so in that process, in the first times that I did that, fortunately, I'm working with my dad, and he's like, and as a really young engraver, I'm trying stuff that's really hard, and it looks awful. And I'm like, God, this is bad. It's like, don't quit. You're not there. You got to keep going. It's going to look bad before it looks good. But you got to go through the bad part to make it look to the good part. So that may sound weird or odd or whatever, but, things just, if you're engraving this Indian head, it just doesn't look like that. It has to go through the process of getting to look like that. And so initially, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. We need to erase this with the, metal eraser. Otherwise known as a bell sander.
Because personally, and certainly when I was doing the wood bowl with Christopher Jones, who's a turner in Fort Worth, and straight away, first couple of cuts were fine, and then I dug into it, and I dug into it real hard. And if it wasn't for him stood there next to me, who was like, it's fine, that happens, we're going to take that material anyway, I'd have been like, oh cool, bin, start again. Or I would have just been like, not for me. So to have someone there to be like, no, this is part of the process.
Well, it was very valuable for me because that, I had the luxury of growing up with a master engraver. already said, hey, when I was 6 or 7, I went into the workshop where all the guys were doing that. And then to study with my dad was great. How that happened when I was 17, somebody told me, if you don't learn to do what your dad does, one of these days he's going to be gone and you'll always regret it. And how that resonated in the heart of a 17-year-old kid, I don't know, but it did. And it's like I had this bucket list inside, and that was on it. Learn to engrave. I learned to play the guitar from my dad, so I'm like, got that by, and did that. Learn to engrave, and it's not like I was putting it off for a long time because I was 17, for Pete's sake. So I wasn't that much of a slacker. Maybe a little bit, but not that much. And it hit me, and I thought, God, what if my dad died, like right now, and I don't know how to do this? What would I do? I would wonder, but I wouldn't know. And so I went to him and I said, hey, Dad, would you teach me how to engrave? And he said, I tell you what, I'll show you everything I know. What you pick up will be up to you. And I said, okay, awesome. When do we start? And so we started in August of 1979 when I was 17. And by October of 79, I cut my first gun. And I wouldn't say that's the recommended practice for everybody, but it's exactly what you said, with the wood turner looking over your shoulder going, no, it's okay. Yeah. Keep on going. Yeah. And so earlier we looked at a progression plate that it's just a steel plate. In the center of it, my dad cut a pattern, and he showed me how to transfer those using ink and tape. And he said, lift this design off, put it here, and engrave it. This is what it needs to look like. Yeah. The only way that you're going to know is if you do it. So I started doing it, and they looked pretty bad starting out, but they got better.
Well, that was a really interesting thing for Kate and I to be able to see, because we basically seen a snapshot of however many weeks, months, years, however long that took. We seen a snapshot of your career through it, which was really interesting, to the point where you could see where some of the background was too indented, some was too light. But what's just occurred to me now is, through that, every single one of those pieces was finished. And I don't know if I would have done that.
Yeah, you'd have been, I'll just start again.
Yeah, so that's a great point. But there are several elements that are going on there. And so if you separate them out, there are the cuts that make the main body of the pattern. And then there are the shading cuts. And then there's some, what we call scallops. They're in leatherwork, they're called a mule foot. Those are put in, and then there's the background. And so if I didn't do it all, I wouldn't learn it all. And so the object is, in this quest, make it look like that. And so it won't look like that if I don't do all of the things that are in there. All of those separate things make that pattern. And so that for me was like the challenge. It's like, okay, I know what I got to do. I just have to learn how to do it. And so in that part of engraving is actually paired disciplines. Okay. If you want to be at the top of the game, it's paired disciplines. And the first discipline is understanding the mechanics of the tools. And it doesn't matter whether you use a hammer and chisel or air tools. You have to understand what the chisel does, what this particular chisel does to make that cut, how it responds, how you sharpen it, and how you use it to make it do what it's designed to do. Okay? And it's like that on all the tools. You understand, get the right tool for the job is a axiom that, okay. So I've got a bunch of tools over here that I use. A few of them I use a lot. A lot of them I use a little, but they're there. And so that when I need that tool, I use that tool. But understanding the mechanics of how to make those tools do the work I want. All of art is getting what's in here out onto the canvas that you're working on. It doesn't matter if it's woodwork, leathercraft, if you're working in stone, any medium, oil painting. You have to get what's in you out onto the thing. And so that's where the vision comes in. And that's where the art comes in. You're using the tools to get what's in you out. And so you want to use the tools in the best way that you can. So you learn how to make them respond. At the same time, if you're me and my journey, it was like, okay, now I have to learn to draw this stuff. And I doodled and would draw things, and art always appealed to me. Okay. Drawing different stuff, not that I was great at it, but I mean, I probably spent more time in school drawing than I did learning anything else, And so taking that skill and bringing it alongside the technical ability is important, especially if you want to do anything world class in this art form.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people can learn how to mechanically work the tools and make the tools make great cuts,
right.
And it's all, technically very good. Artistically needs to match that, because if you cut a bad design or a very poor design, no matter how well it's cut, it's still a poor design. So the technical ability of the cutting might be great, but if it's a bad design, it's never going to look good. No. So if you're learning how to engrave, don't neglect drawing, because it's very important. I'm talking to you. It's very important, because if you can't draw it and you can't design it, it doesn't matter how good you cut it. So pick up a pencil, piece of paper, and draw, and practice drawing, and practice cutting what you draw, because that is the other side of the coin of engraving. And so when you have someone who can draw and design and create, and it comes out of you, and then engrave it and cut it or sculpt it or whatever, you have somebody to contend with. And there's a lot of them out there now, and I think there is my little disclaimer, I don't know, it's a disclaimer, my public service announcement, there you go, yeah. My PSA is that I think air tooling has created a renaissance of engraving in our country, because it has opened up the opportunity for people to learn the art who would have never had that opportunity at all. Mm-hmm. And so I'm especially excited and encouraged by artists from other genres who come over and say, now I want to engrave. And there's some really good ones. And it's exciting because you see work from those folks that is tremendous. And it never would have happened if air tooling had not come along. And so the way I do it with a hammer and chisel is old school, right? And it's really hard to learn. It's very time consuming to learn. So air tooling is not. It's a little easier. It's a different technique. Mm-hmm. And so it has just lit a fire under the people in this country who want to do that.
Good.
Why is that? Why is it the air tools have brought such... Because I look at it and look at the way you do it as like a low-cost bar of entry. Mm-hmm. It's a small... I jokingly called it a toffee hammer earlier. It's a small toffee hammer and a couple of little chisels. And like you say...
I'm going to hit you with it in a minute, and then you're going to find out how little that hammer is.
You've got like a lot of tools, but you wouldn't need a lot of tools to get started, etc. And I look at that as being like... And I don't want to say it's the purest form of the art and take anything away from the pneumatic tool, but to me that seems like the simplest. It's what I really like about wood turning. Like, it's very pure, very simple.
It's kind of the bare bones version of it.
Yeah.
And so if you want to get into it on a budget, yeah.
But then why having air tools, which are, from what we understand, a reasonably expensive setup, including the, you've got an Octavisor version rather than the Leica scope, and why is the air tool thing given it such a renaissance?
So it has, it's an easier method to learn. You're sitting down, you're using the chisel in your usually dominant hand. And so you have a gas pedal that you can step on to make the chisel go and stop. And so it's an easier method of learning. So I'm standing up, I'm moving. There are at least 11 different things going on while I'm working. And so there's a lot of coordination that I can't think about 11 things while I'm working, but I know they all have to occur. And I went through that process when I started teaching, because I'm like, how am I going to tell you what to do? I just do it. It's like breathing, right? You don't think about breathing unless you can't breathe, and then you're thinking about it, but I don't think about it. And so you develop the muscle memory, the, I guess, subconscious thing of all these adjustments that are going on in real time while you're working. And so if you don't have somebody helping you, It's not that you can't learn hammer and chisel engraving. It just takes a lot longer. It's a definitely less expensive way to get involved, but it requires, I think, maybe more, I don't know if dedication is the right word, but it's just a longer learning curve. And so there are fewer people who teach that method. There are more people who teach air tooling. And so because of that, and if you were a jeweler, you were already used to using what's called a burin, which is a short engraver, with your hand and turning the vise, a vise like that you...
Right.
So all we're doing now is adding power to it. So now you got a V8 instead of just hand power.
Right.
Same technique, same everything. And you can, wow, man, you step on the gas and you can cut with this bad boy. You know?
So with an air engraver, obviously you've not got the hammer, that's doing the hammering, and you're able to turn with your hand the workpiece turn rather than you moving around it.
So think of it as milling, right? So you're a little milling machine. And so in air tool engraving, you're holding the cutter here, it's got the power, and you're feeding the material into it with your hand.
That's what Ben was showing us.
Yeah. That was the tool Ben was using, wasn't
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're going to make a straight cut, you're going to make an overhand and an underhand cut. And so, you know, it's somewhat intuitive, I guess. This is just different. You have to do this, you know, you have to hit the back of a chisel with a hammer all the time while you're not look at it, you know. You just have to hit it and keep hitting it. It's like a slow motion woodpecker. But because of that, I think it has allowed folks that would never contact, you know, so it started out, it's sort of the ripple effect. You throw a rock in the pond, you know, you get some ripples, and then before you know it, they've spread out and it's farther and farther. And so what we see now is the ripple effect from Don Glaser and John Rohner, who invented the pneumatic equipment, and the company is called GRS now.
Yep.
And so the pebble that they threw in the pond with the Gravermeister has rippled out now, where a lot of people have learned, they're teaching other people, and so you have several generations of really good engravers who become instructors and they're helping people. And because of that, you have the ability for somebody, so if you've got an interest in it, and you just, man, I got to know how to do this. Well, there are people who teach that. There are places you can go to learn. When I started, the Gravermeister had been invented when I started, but not much more than that.
Right.
And so, and there were no, that I know of, there may have been, but I wasn't aware of any schools that you could go to.
Okay.
So I was like studying in an old master program, you know, where I was an apprentice and then a journeyman and then, you know, develop on past that. But it was all doing it. It wasn't, I didn't go somewhere to get instruction and, you know, go through a course or whatever. It was the school of hard knocks. And, you know, it's like riding a bike. You know, you get the training wheels on and you do it, and then one day you're brave and you go, I want to take them off, and then you fall and just skin yourself all over. And you have a choice. Do you get back on? Or do you just throw down the bike and walk?
Yeah.
And most of us get back on the bike, and we might fall off again, but eventually all of a sudden we're riding the bike. And so, yeah.
Like it.
So even the place your dad was doing it, that was still hand. Your dad was a hammer and chisel.
Yeah.
Had you had your time again, would you have done if
I could go back in time?
If you go back in time, would you have done it? I suppose you wouldn't have, because that's just how your dad done it, so that's what you were always around.
Yeah.
Do you think anything would have been different if your dad was a pneumatic engraver? Like if we'd fast forwarded this all, or if you, or was there any point where you thought, oh, I might jump to a pneumatic engraver?
I've tried pneumatic engravers, and I've had two of the brands that are made, and I don't have anything against them. I sold the ones I had because they weren't getting used.
Right.
And I thought, you know, this is dumb, because somebody could be using these, and they should, instead of them just sitting here. So I sold them.
Yeah.
And you know, earlier in this conversation, we said whatever your dad does is kind of your default normal setting. And so if I had grown up and he was using pneumatic tooling, I don't think I would care. It would be, that's what he does. Default. You know, I want to learn to engrave. Okay, let me show you what I do.
Yep.
So I guess if he played the piccolo, I would have said, "Hey, I want to learn how to play the piccolo. How do you do it?"
Yeah.
You know, or,
sounds like it was maybe one of the only instruments he didn't play.
Well, no, he was a pretty good guitar picker, and he could play the mandolin a little bit, saw a little bit on the fiddle, but he was mainly a guitar picker. Yeah. He was more of an entertainer, I guess,
right,
than a musician's musician.
Right.
He was that, but that's another story.
Yeah.
So, and we can segue into that if you want.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that interests me about that and about your dad's history and then the history that it feels like you've encapsulated by taking this on is it's not just the engraving, is it? It's like, we met your business partner in American Scroll, which I want to talk about later in this podcast, the sort of future of that, if you don't mind. This is kind of like snapshotting textures through the ages, this engraving, isn't it? Like engraving back home's not a thing. Like we obviously see the nice Holland and Holland shotguns and they're very detached from reality. Whereas what we've seen certainly in the southern states is everyone's aware of who you are and who the good engravers are. And I say that because you're one of the good engravers. I don't say that because of like, there's the good engravers. Oh, and there's this guy Weldon as well.
Oh, and then there's,
But it seems to
I appreciate that, Clark.
It seems to snapshot Texas, the American Scroll engraving. Why is that? And why is that important to you because you're obviously very passionate about continuing that.
Yes, I do. So I think one of the things about that, and off camera, we discussed the history of Colt firearms and engraving and where American Scroll came from. And in a nutshell, German immigrants who came to this country in the 1850s started working for Colt and Winchester and Smith & Wesson and all of the early gun companies. And many of those had a level of embellishment on them from just maybe entry level on up to world-class presentation pieces. And so they quickly discovered that the style of engraving that they had learned in Europe did not fit the canvas that they were tasked with working on now.
Right.
So they developed a scroll that looked better suited to what it was going on. And it became known as American Scroll, which is probably, when you think about it, it's really fitting because America is a land inhabited by people who came from other countries. And so you have these guys from Germany that created American Scroll. So it's kind of funny in a way.
Yeah.
It's not, well, anyway, I don't know. I think it's funny, but I'm probably weird. Than you think.
The history of it's like very clearly like German and French. We went through the book earlier, isn't it?
Yeah, and some English, so we don't want to leave them out. But the roots of that came from these guys who came from Germany. And so this is a long way to making a point, but I'm answering your question, so you just have to bear with me. So they developed this style of scroll, which was used on a lot of guns that were carried by Texas Rangers. And if you don't know who the Texas Rangers are, I'm not talking about the baseball team. I'm talking about the law enforcement guys who this year in 2023 are celebrating their 200th year as a law enforcement agency. So they actually predate the nation of Texas and, of course, then the state of Texas.
Really?
So Texas as a nation started in 1836. From 1836 to 1845, Texas was known as the Republic of Texas. It was its own country. In 1845, we allowed the United States to annex us, which we're still waiting. The jury's out on that, whether that was a good decision. And anyway, that brings us up to date. So in that span of time, you have these law enforcement guys who were protecting the frontier from marauding bands of whoever it was that were attacking the settlers until now. And in that span of time, most of those rangers had very highly decorated arms. They were the peak law enforcement officers of our state. And they generally dress like it, especially from the 1880s on forward. They would have a factory engraved Colt single action, tool leather holsters, a really nice Winchester rifle, sometimes engraved. These guys, they were badasses. Okay, might have to X that out, but they were.
Yeah.
they were as bad as or worse than the outlaws they were hunting, and they had to be. And their equipment said, I'm serious about what I do.
Right.
And so into the modern time, the rangers that I met, I've known rangers before I started engraving. And since I was that 6 or 7 year old kid in that shop, I was meeting Texas Rangers, and they always had a nicely engraved weapon on. So they looked the part.
Yeah.
And when you saw them, especially when you're a kid, you're like,
Wow.
man, who are these guys?
Yeah.
You know, these guys are cool. I want to always be on the good side of those guys. So anyway, why am I passionate about the American Scroll and stuff? Because it fits in what has gone on in the history of where I live in Texas. And so it's a big part of it. American Scroll was used all over the United States. It just so happens that I was born here. I've grown up here. My family's from here. We've had family here since the Republic of Texas days. And so it's a big deal to me. And keeping that alive, I think is really, it's really cool. I'm passionate about that. Yeah. And that's why.
You can tell. You can tell you're passionate about it.
Yeah, well, sorry. I don't mean to yell.
That's all.
So that's a long answer to your question. And so that style of scroll just fit well with what those guys were doing. And they were kind of a big deal where we're from. And so that's the answer. That's my final answer.
Yeah. And I know we talked a lot about firearms there, and certainly a lot of what we know engraving as is from firearms, like the Holland and stuff.
Yeah.
And that was obviously the start, but it seems to certainly your work transfer to everything. Mm-hmm. The stuff you've got in the vise at the moment, they're banjo parts, am I correct? And you've done a lot of guitar stuff. And
I do.
It seems to be a good fit for almost anything.
Mm-hmm.
I do. And so I think we discussed this off camera as well. The technique that I use can be applied to many, many things. And anybody who's an engraver already knows that. But for the people who aren't, that are interested, it's a piece of metal that you're cutting in most cases. For me, I also do pearl inlay, engraving on pearl inlay for some instrument companies, Collings Guitars out of Austin. I've done a lot of pearl engraving for them. And so I don't know, maybe the coolest thing about that is same tools, same guy, same vise, same hammer, just a very, very delicate technique. Mm-hmm. Same tools I cut on brass or silver or steel. Same exact stuff.
Really?
It's just how you use the tool. So learning to understand that technical ability and the limitations of the material that you're cutting, the characteristics of that material, those are the things that you learn and come to understand. And then you bring your art to bear using the tools that you have at hand. Uh-huh. So,
is there any material that you've not engraved on that you would love to engrave on? Because we've seen gold inlay, we've seen green gold inlay, we've seen pearl, everything that we've been here.
I'll have to think about that, because I've done titanium, which is, in my opinion, miserable. I've done stainless steel shotguns made by Ruger that some have cut great, some are so hard you can't even think about cutting them. I've done surgical scissors.
Oh, wow.
Oh, really?
A friend of mine was a doctor. He was also a professor at the medical school in San Antonio. He's like, hey, I've got a graduating class. I want to put their name on scissors. I'm like, yeah, no problem. Well, guess what?
Surgical scissors are real hard.
They're real hard. It's like, oh my gosh, when will I get to the last, So anyway, I did that. I've done all kinds of precious metals, pearl, like we discussed. I don't know that there's anything that I haven't engraved that I would want to engrave.
What about product-wise? What about output-wise? Is there anything that you really would love to engrave?
I guess I'd have to give that some thought too. In 43 years, I've done a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of different stuff.
What haven't I done? Can't remember.
Yeah, it must be a short list by now.
Well, probably, but there's always something. But many times in learning a craft like that, early on especially, there are projects that you're like, oh man, let me try that. or someone will come and ask you, well, could you do a blah, 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 blah? And you're like young and dumb and, need some, you need a job, right? You need to do something. And you're like, yeah, I can do that. And then you try to do it. And then you learn a really big lesson.
Learn quick too.
Yeah. To how to say no. And when to say no is as important as saying yes.
Yeah.
So, but those are powerful learning opportunities if you take, because, you said you're going to do it, you're going to do it. And it's like, so, we're not necessarily discussing how much it costs to have stuff done, but when somebody comes, we're not discussing it on this podcast, but when somebody commissions their work to be done, there's always a budget. Somebody, even if they're an uber wealthy individual, people still want to know how much something's going to cost, and everybody's got a limit that they want to live with, and that's fine. That's how the world works. You know? And so early, especially early in a career, somebody's like, well, I want to get this done. Okay, it's going to be, you're estimating, well, I think it's going to take me this long. So you arrive at a fee, and then you do it. And then it took you 3 or 4 times as long to do it. So you don't go back to the client and go, well, golly, Jack, it took me 4 times as long, so I got to charge you 4 times as much to get this done. You hand it to them, and you go, thank you for the learning experience. Anyway, so what you do is you learn, if I'm going to do something like that, I got to be more accurate on my estimation of time. The other thing you may learn is, I'm never doing that again. So the important point is that you learn from those things. I won't say it's a mistake.
No.
But if you don't know, and, you get in over your head, well, you finish it, but, you got to...
And it's quite important to recognise that as it's not a mistake.
No,
it's only a mistake if you haven't learnt from it.
Right, if you keep doing it,
Yeah.
If you do it 2 or 3 times, it starts to become a mistake real quick.
Yeah, so, man, we've talked about a lot of stuff. I don't know if there's any level of continuity to this except your questions,
There doesn't need to be continuity.
Yeah. So anyway.
Is that something that you would do differently, though? It doesn't sound like it, like just saying yes to everything and just... Because ultimately that's why you're here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ultimately that's the super quick progression. It's just yes, 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 yes. Some turns out great, some doesn't turn out great. Some you make money, some you lose money.
Well, I tell you what, I started out as a freelance engraver. Okay, and so it was my wife and I, Tony, and so we're married. We have no kids. And we got married when I was 18, she was 19. And so I'm an engraver, Hey, this is cool, And so then, you start expecting your first child and things take a little more serious turn. And you think, Then you have a couple more. Now you have a family. And when you're working as an artist like that, and a project comes along and you have the choice of, I can do this and get a little bit of money, or I can do this and have nothing. I think a lot of times we choose, well, I got to make some money. I got bills to pay. I got mouths to feed. I got to do it. Okay, so I'm going to take that project. And so those are learning times and learning experiences. And so you don't, my advice would be, if you find yourself in that situation, it's not that you hurry through it, it's you learn the lesson. But you don't give the client a bad product or a shoddy workmanship thing because you underbid it.
Yeah, that's on you.
That's on you.
Yeah.
And so what you learn is, suck it up. Next time, you'll be wise, and you may not take that commission, or if you do, it's going to cost enough to cover what you need. And so that was my learning, thing as I was growing up, and the motivation kind of behind it. It's like, God, I don't want to be a starving artist. I mean, I could starve. I could stand to lose a few pounds, but I'm not going to drag my family through that, right? Yeah. So, yeah. So one of the things I did in that process, I went to work as a firefighter in the city of San Antonio. So I spent 30 years as a professional firefighter. So my criteria was I wanted a job that had a regular paycheck, good benefits, a retirement, health insurance, those kind of things, and massive amounts of time off. Well, that excluded just about everything. Yeah, I'm like, well, okay, what can it be? So my dad had some friends that were firefighters, and so I'd kind of grown up around that as well. And I thought, they work a pretty interesting schedule, and I'll see if I can do that. And so I did, and I've retired from that. But I spent a career doing that. But it also allowed me to provide for my family, and have a lot of time to work and practice and develop my skills, and not starve or not drag my family through abject poverty while I was doing it. And so
and ultimately relieve a lot of pressure.
Yes. Because
allowing you to be the real, like you said at the start, this was about getting what's in you out.
Getting it out. That's the artistic part of any artist. And so I think, when we look at people and the work that they produce, a lot of times you don't know the backstory. And so what you guys are doing is valuable because you're sharing the story of what happens. And so we don't see the struggle that person goes through. We don't know how many hours they practiced and how long the road has been to get to where they are.
Yeah.
And what people do, and Billy and I were having this conversation the other day about, people look at the finished product and then they say, oh man, you have a lot of talent. And I don't know if you're listening to me or not, Bill, but we were talking about that. You have a lot of talent. And the guy was saying, no, I have a lot of practice. I guess that's the paraphrasing of it.
Yeah.
And so you look at my top-end work or the top-end work of any engraver, and that's what you see, and you think, oh, man. But you don't know. You don't see the years of working and getting to the point where you're even capable of producing that kind of work and what it takes. Some of us arrive there relatively quickly. Others, it's a longer road, but there's always a road of discovery and work and dedication and perseverance and sticking to it.
Perseverance is a good one.
Yeah, perseverance is a really important one. But what's important there, and what's important with people to be honest on, not necessarily always, like this podcast, we obviously want everyone to be as honest as possible, but any podcast or any media opportunity that makers get, I could only urge them to be honest in the fact that it's not all sunshine and roses. And all of this, like, social media, go all in, the only way you'll get it is going all in, is nonsense. We all still have bills to pay, and everyone should go all in. But going all in and also having, all in doesn't mean just do it to the point of impoverishing a whole family.
Yeah,
like you found a way to go all in and maintain a job that had benefits and a paycheck.
Yeah.
And that's what's really important. And that's what I always love when people bring that kind of thing up on this. Because other people will be listening to this thing. I've said it loads, like a lot of people that listen to this and a lot of people that email or message and talk to us about this podcast are people that are right on the fence about starting. They're right on the knife edge.
Yeah.
And they just want to jump over to it. So hearing stuff like that is invaluable for those people.
Yeah, I've seen it a lot too. Kate, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. Well, be quiet over there, will you? I've also seen similar things like that. So a guy wants to be an engraver, and so I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to be an engraver, and blah blah blah. What do I do? Well, first you might want to rethink that plan. So you can take this, if you're careful, you can take it from an interest into a hobby, and then into a vocation, if you build it correctly. And so jumping into it with both feet, just diving in, may not be the best plan for you, unless your skill level is exceedingly high.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It's a tough way to make a living. The best way that I know of to make a couple of $1 million as an engraver?
Start with 5.
Start with 5. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So
same in farming. The best way to make a small fortune farming is start with a large
big one. Yeah, start with a big one. That's the best way. So it's got to be at some levels. And so for me, it was like, well, this is what I'm doing. Hey, I'm going to keep doing it. I'm making money. I'm learning how to do it. So I'm going to stick with it and keep going. But it's not an easy way to make a living. And so if we go back to the 1850s to the period 1920, guys like Nimsky or Helfricht, they had shops. Nimsky, not so much, I don't believe. I think Nimsky was pretty much sole authorship, meaning that he was working on what you see.
Right.
Helfricht may have had several people under his employ, as did others. But there's still primarily that guy is working with his hands. He's doing something and getting paid for it. And those guys were able to make a living for them and their family doing their trade.
Right.
So they were a craftsman, not an artist.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
There's a big difference.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what it is, you need to study it and figure it out, because there's a big difference between a craftsman and an artist. And so, in my opinion,
I would agree. I would agree whether you use those words or different words to describe it. There is a difference with someone that's having to do all of the parts of the business. And that's ultimately what you've described as an artist, what we would describe as a maker that's doing all of the parts of the business, or the person who's collecting the paycheck for doing the hands part.
Right. And so if you have, if you're working in a factory, perhaps, and you have a function that you do, you're part of a bigger picture, a bigger team.
Yeah.
And there are things that come along. You do your part, they do their part.
Yep.
And at the end of the factory, out pops a whatever it is, so you're contributing to that. Versus, like you say, if you're a maker, if you're a sole author, then, we've discussed a small part of a business.
Yeah.
Right? And so the technical ability, the artistic ability, that's all great. But then you have all these other things like marketing and bookkeeping and on and on. And when do you find time to do all that? And how do you charge for it? And how do you do that needs to be done when you should be doing this that needs to be done? So it's it's like juggling flaming bowling pins, right? And those are all challenges, I think, that are very, a smack of reality in the face for a lot of people, because to me, the true artists are the guys who, everything else be damned, I'm creating this.
Yeah.
Okay, and they do, and I've seen it. And there's a wake of destruction behind them. And their family is in disarray. Yeah. They probably live in, a little bitty spot that's awful. Not that there's anything wrong with a small spot, but it's just, their main focus and all their energy goes into creating whatever it is they're creating.
Yeah.
And they may create fabulous stuff, but there's not a balance of, I'm creating, but not managing anything else well.
Do you know,
manage it well.
Yeah, I'm sure it was Bert the Potter, but I'd need to go back and re-listen to it myself. He decided very early on he wanted to be a potter. So he made all his life decisions based on that. He bought a house that he thought would be I'm sure it was Bert. Bert, if it wasn't you, I don't want to categorise you into this, but he bought like a house that he knew would be within budget for a potter. He drives a car that would be within budget. He made all these decisions because of it, and I was like, that's the way. Like, if you've decided so early on, and then rather than see all these lifestyle things that you want and be like, oh, but I want to also be an artist.
Right, yeah.
That's difficult.
Yeah.
So you mentioned there, when you started, you then find out the books, and you think, how did you juggle all that early doors? Because you also had a full-time job.
I did.
Yes.
Which was 24 or 48 hour shifts?
We were 24 on, 48 off. And so I had, when I was at work, and I actually engraved in my early years. I'd take a little portable setup and I would engrave at the station.
Nice.
And so it got to the point where everybody knew that I did it. And So one of the battalion chief's vans would pull up and they would say, "Hey, is Lister working today?" And, "Hey, 5-0's over here. They want to see you." Okay, so I go up to the front and they're like, "Hey, Captain so-and-so is retiring and the boys want to spend about this much on the knife. So, and we need it by, next C shift or whatever.
Yeah.
Can you do that?" "Yeah." "Okay." "Okay, well, let me know when it's ready. I'll come pick it up." I'm like, "All right," So I would do,
Was that carte blanche to do it in hours?
Yes. Yeah, I was back in the back with my own little setup. And
Nice.
So cool.
at that time, where I worked, as long as we were behaving ourselves, first of all, when the tone goes off, you got to get on the rig and go.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yep.
So whatever you're doing can't keep you from doing what your real job
Yes.
is. And so if we had training to do, or if we had work to do, or business to take care of, that was always done. And then after that, if we didn't have anything to do, I'm like, well, I'm going back to my shop,
Yeah.
And I would, I'd work till 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning and then go to bed, get up the next morning. We didn't change shift until noon at that time.
Wow.
And so get up the next morning, do a little bit more work, and then pack everything up, go home, go to the other shop, and get back on it.
All in the pursuit of perfection.
Oh yeah, just trying to, you're always trying to get better.
Yeah.
And this is a really good place to put this in. I was trying to get better than me. Okay.
Yep.
I was trying to be better than I was.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I have a lot of books here. I don't know if the camera can see
Oh, it'll pick them up, yeah.
all these books.
But I'll pick up one of the two bookshelves.
Yeah, I've got a lot of engraving books, and I study that. And so now, in this day and time, you can also get on the internet and see what guys are doing. And I still study engraving, right? But I'm not trying to be any of the people that are in these books or any of what I see on social media. I'm not trying to be better than them. I'm trying to be the best me that I can be.
That's
so
important.
Yeah,
That's
you say
exactly
that
what I
all the
say. I'm
time.
like, just
Yeah.
be the best you can be.
That's what you got to do.
Yeah.
And so anybody that's listening to this, no matter what field you're in, it's just, in my opinion, I think you're wasting time trying to be better than so-and-so.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? So-and-so might be fabulous, but you're not so-and-so.
Yeah.
Be you.
Be fabulous at being you.
So this is a great time to say this. My dad, before he got into engraving and stuff, he was in country music. And so he had this fabulous career as a country music. He was an up-and-coming star.
Don't know if the camera will see that, but
He was on the road. He opened the show for Hank Williams Sr. They traveled all around the United States and Canada. He was on the Grand Ole Opry. He was a recording artist for Capitol Records. And so he was at the peak, okay? So, unfortunately, in 1953, on January 1, Hank Williams Sr. died. And so my dad went a different direction, still stayed in music, eventually left and went back into other things. Fast forward to about 1973, I came home from school, and Hank Williams Jr. was sitting on our couch talking to my dad. And so I came in. My dad's like, "Hey, this is Hank Jr., blah, blah, blah. Oh, hey, how you doing?" And I'm like, "What do we got to eat around here?" I'm a 12 or 13-year-old kid. I'm hungry, just got out of school. And I'm going to go ride my motorcycle or whatever. So whatever. Not that it wasn't a big deal, but it was just like, okay.
You're just the people you've been around, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. It wasn't abnormal. Mm-hmm. And so later, Dad tells me, Hank Jr. was struggling because he came to talk to my dad because my dad knew his dad. And Hank Jr. couldn't talk to his dad. But he could talk to my dad who knew his dad. Right. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And he said, "Bill," which is what my dad was called, "they want me to be my dad. And I don't want to do that." And he goes, "I just wonder what my dad would tell me." And Dad told him, "Son, the world is already, let me tell you what your dad would tell you. The world has already had one Hank Williams. They don't need another one. You be you."
Nice.
That's what your dad would tell you. And so Hank Jr., I'm not going to say it's because of that, but he made the decision to make a paradigm shift in his music, and he became who he was inside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He became the best him. He didn't need to be his dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so all that to say, when we look at, in my genre, it's engraving, and there's some fabulous engravers in the world. And that's awesome. I love them. I love looking at what they do. But when I engrave, I'm not trying to be them.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be the best me that I can be. And if other people who look at it go, oh my God, this stuff sucks, this guy's awful. Okay. I'm trying to be the best I can be. There's also going to be people who look at it and go, oh man, I don't know how it could get any better.
Yeah.
And I've heard that. And in my mind, I'm going, well, you haven't looked at so-and-so or so-and-so, because they're clearly much better, in my opinion. But you're the one who's looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate people who say that. My quest is to be the best I can be.
That should always be the quest.
That should always be the quest. You're absolutely
And
right.
in every area of life. And so am I always successful? Well, no, but I'm on a quest. I'm not finished.
Yeah.
That's my mission, And so Winston Churchill is an engraver, not the Prime Minister, for you guys.
Yeah.
He's an engraver. There's an engraver by that name here in this country. And Winston
I think Paul spoke
is at
Paul spoke about him, yeah.
What's that?
Paul spoke about him as well,
Oh,
Winston Churchill, yeah.
Oh, listen. Winston is, if there was a best engraver in the universe, not the world, in the universe, Winston would be one of the contenders for that. He's that good. That good. He said, always do your best work. It doesn't matter what it's on. If it's just a small piece, always do your best work. If it's just a small, maybe seemingly insignificant piece, don't do substandard work just because it's a small thing. Always do your best work. I thought, that's fabulous advice, because sometimes I think, maybe we think like this, whatever, it's on a banjo, which probably pisses off as many people as bagpipes do. So people would think, oh, well, whatever, it's a banjo. Why not give it your best shot? Make it the nicest banjo tailpiece anyone has seen.
Yeah.
Right? Or try to.
Yeah. Make it the talking point of that banjo.
Yeah,
the
don't
talking
do
point of that
insignificant
firearm, or make it the talking point of that piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So somebody spent some serious time trying to make it nice.
Yeah.
I don't know. There you go. There's a nickel's worth of advice for $1.
Well, this is exactly it, and it's fantastic advice. What about social media is a great tool. We all see it. We all get inspired by what we see, or I hope everyone uses it to be inspired by what they see. But how do you stop other influence leaching in, or is there a world where you do let it leach in?
Well, I've heard it said that good artists borrow and great artists steal.
Right.
So I think that we're all influenced. None of us, there may be an exception, but none of us are inventing anything. We're all doing what's been done. Mm-hmm. In the stuff that I do, I'm influenced by the masters who have gone before me. I'm putting my spin on it, but I'm definitely influenced. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that I'm standing on the shoulders of all of those people who have come before me, because they laid the groundwork.
Like,
Those immigrants who came here and developed this style of engraving, made the foundation for that. And every person who's come along since then and has made some refinements to it has contributed into that. Now I'm doing it the way I see it, which apparently a lot of people like, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
But did I invent it? Nope. Do I use it? Absolutely. But I filter it through my filter.
Yeah.
And I have the way that I do it, the way I see it, that kind of thing. And so you don't... So I'm not sure about what your question means, but influenced by, if you look at somebody's work that you really like, it's like, man, I understand how to do that. And I've helped people that want to know how to do what I do. And I don't go, no, go figure it out. Develop your own thing. I'm like, the guy wants to know, here, these are things that you need to do. These are the elements that make it up.
Yeah.
Here's how you put it together. Because guess what? Most likely, they're going to take it and they're going to put their spin on it, and it's going to become their thing. Yeah. It's not going to be copies of my work. It's going to be it'll be influenced by that and everybody else. Is that answering the question?
That answers the question exactly. Yeah, there seems to be this movement or this feeling towards either you're copying someone or you shouldn't look at anything and you should do everything original. But there is, in my opinion, and it's only my opinion, there is no originality left. Mm-hmm. Everything has been done, whether you've seen it or not.
You're right.
Or whether you've subconsciously took it on.
Right.
So when I say that, about inspiration leaching in, and I ask a number of people that, whether it's in podcasts or just in general conversation, I'm always interested in it's more if they're aware of letting it leach in. Mm-hmm. Because it is happening.
Oh, sure.
And it is happening.
Well, I hope I answered adequately.
Absolutely.
So when I started studying with my dad, one of the first books that he pulled out was the Nimsky book. He's like, take a look at this guy's design skills, because he's like a cat. No matter where you throw him, he lands on his feet.
Yeah.
And so the struggle for an engraver is you've got an area that you want to fill up, or maybe partially fill, with some kind of scroll work and something that looks nice. So how do you do that? Mm-hmm. And so by looking at what other people have done, that doesn't mean you copy what they did, but you think, okay, it's a matter of perspective, right? So you look at it from maybe a little bit different angle. So it's solving a problem. How do you do it and make it look? What are the parameters of the language we're speaking? What are the parameters of the style of scroll work we're speaking? Keeping within those parameters and filling up this space is our job. How do we do that the most artistic way that we can? And so elements and things that are unique to certain styles, mm-hmm. my dad would say, that's a pretty cool thing. You ought to put that in your bag of tricks. So what's that little pouch you Scottish guys carry?
Sporin.
Okay. So the sporin is like, I ask you, so what is that? And you said, it's the Mary Poppins bag.
Yeah.
Because it could have anything in it.
Yeah.
Right? So in this country, my dad would call that your bag of tricks.
Right.
Because you keep all your stuff in there. And so when you need one, you open your bag of tricks and you get it out. So that was his way of saying, file that away because that's cool. You might want to use that, that element or that thing. And so as an example, there's a design on it's the butt of a black powder Colt that Nimsky did. And I thought, you know what? That's a really cool design. I'm going to adapt that onto a cuff bracelet. And so I did. It's based on Nimsky's idea, but it's my execution of it and brought into the modern world and expounded upon on another medium.
Okay.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So listen, I've been influenced by all kinds of people.
Yeah.
And so do I copy anyone? No. That's not necessary.
No. Good answer.
But you're, what?
It was a good answer.
Yeah. It's not necessary to copy them. Mm-hmm. Invent your own stuff. Look at what's going on. We're influenced by art every day. Yep. Mm-hmm. And scroll is all over the place if you look for it. Mm-hmm. It's used in lots of places.
So it's like we were talking the other night, in my day job, as it were, in the engineering side of things, I was saying that the reason I can do what I do is I'm sure it comes back to being really young and my mum's dad always having diggers around and always fixing diggers and stuff. I'm like, none of the machinery I design is new. Mm-hmm. I'm just aware of machinery in the world and look at all that machinery and repurpose it to whether it's, working with Jason and putting a big dinosaur head on the top of it or putting a spaceship on top of it.
Right.
It's just being aware of other stuff. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean you're copying it.
No.
And actually, if I was copying it, it wouldn't do what I had to do. Do you know, if it was a direct copy, it wouldn't do what I had to do.
Exactly. Yeah. Because you need to adapt that to fit what you're doing.
Yes.
And that's exactly what we're talking about here. It's a great analogy because it's taking what's existing out there. And I think, at this stage, there's very little new. Now, every now and then we see something in the world of engraving. It's like, wow, that's cool. That's different. That's awesome. It's really, really neat. And it's that guy's thing, So are you going to steal that? No, because that guy is the one who came up with it, and he's the one doing it. Yeah. Might it influence something that you do in the future? Possibly.
Yep.
Yeah. But directly copying?
No.
Yeah, it's not a direct copy because it wouldn't work. Things that are direct copies don't work.
No. Not a good idea.
Yeah. So you learned from your dad, who worked in a
very interesting guy.
Yeah, a very interesting guy who worked with other engravers in like an engraving shop. They don't seem to exist anymore, do they? Like engraving shops as such.
Not so much. I'm trying to think of anybody that's got... The only persons that I would know, and I don't know this anyone personally, but in the world of silver engraving, there may be a few shops where they have multiple engravers working on stuff. One thing that makes that easy now is with the internet and the ease of shipping things, especially here in this country. It's like everybody works remotely, right? So it's not that difficult to work remote. Boom, throw something into UPS or FedEx or whoever and ship it back. And so it's a little bit easier.
Yeah. So where does someone go that wants to do what you've done, to learn? And where does this end, with Weldon? And I'm hoping the answer is it doesn't end. But I'll ask the question anyway. So you'll get to a point in your career where you're not engraving where you're not engraving anymore. What about apprenticeships? What about other people coming on? How does that all work for you, or how do you see it working?
For me, I don't have an apprentice at this point. I've been asked many times about that, and it's just not, for me, the time that needs to happen. There may come a time. Now, I have taught classes, and I have passed on the knowledge that I have through those and helping other people. Not really sure. If I were to keel over right now, I guess that would be the end of it. For the hands-on engraving stuff. Do
you find that a worry?
Do I what?
Do you find that a worry?
No, because I'll be dead.
Yeah. It's not a worry for you. It might be a worry for all of us.
Yeah, right.
Because there is a point certainly with crafts and traditional crafts where you're not just the craftsman, the artist, but you're also a custodian of the craft.
So I think one of the things I've done is, my work has been captured in books and magazines and videos and podcasts, and it's talked about and maintained. So this might be a great place to make a segue into another part of this podcast, because obviously, as we've discussed, the engraving is a big deal to me. The style of engraving is important, where I'm from geographically and all that, and so. Sometime back, I started wondering, and I guess the quest for this started with, and you know this because you're a maker. There's only so much that you can do with your hands, right? And so there's a limit. No matter how fast you are, no matter how good you are, no matter what you do, there's a limit on what you're capable of producing. And so for artists, how do you create a revenue stream with your art? And so I looked at a lot of different things and explored a lot of different things and castings and doing this and that and blah, 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 and had some, some success with various parts of it. But I was pretty difficult to satisfy on the quality of it, because it's like, this just doesn't look like the original. And it's like, I don't know.
Missing that soul, isn't it?
Yeah, it's missing something. And so it just doesn't work. And so then that progression led to, I actually had a student. The cat, this podcast is interrupted by the cat. Brought to you by DC, short for darn cat. And we wish the darn cat would shut up. So one of my students had studied in North Texas at North Texas State in print. And he said, man, he goes, your cuts are so clean. He goes, have you ever thought about doing some prints? And I said, well, yeah, I have, but I don't know anything about it. And he goes, well, your work would be great. So that kind of lit the fire. I'm like, well, I wonder what all that means and what do you have to do and blah, blah, blah. So I finally decided, okay, I'm going to do one. And so I engraved a steel plate with the image of, in this case, a Colt single action. And then it's like, well, am I going to print these? I'm like, no, I'm going to find somebody with an equal amount of skill in what they do as what I've got.
Nice.
Because I don't want a substandard print.
Yeah.
I want a good one. Not even good, I want a really good one. Really good. And so I found a lady that was a former professor at a university that taught that.
Okay.
Excuse me. And so I had her do them. And I thought, this is cool because it picks up everything on this plate that I engraved. It's like printing money. And so I did a series of 5. They were limited editions, and I sold those. And I think they're mostly, I think I have one actual print left out of all of them that I've done. And just playing footsie with the cat, no big deal. It's 2:30, time to. Yeah. Anyway. So that was intriguing. And I thought, okay, so what would this image look like if we put it on a shirt? And so I got with my son, Bill, and he made the image I'm old school. It's a great time to say this. I use a pencil and a piece of paper. I don't, get over on the computer and design stuff on the computer. And it's not that I couldn't. It's that's not my thing. And so I had him help me out. I sent it off to a company, had some shirts printed, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. So I sold them. Thought, people like this. But I don't know anything about shirts. And this is, I'm not satisfied with the fabric. I don't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. And it's, this is like a side gig that is interesting, but I'm not sure what to do with it. But it really looks cool, and I think people are going to like this. And so that kind of built up, and it was this, desire to do that. And then it became sort of evident that, hey, I think people would like this, and they would buy it if it were available. And so several things, allowed us to investigate that even further. And then we incorporated a company called American Scroll. And I found out that name wasn't trademarked. Yeah. And so I thought, that's what I want to call my company, because the first style of scroll that I ever worked on or ever studied was American Scroll. And
this is an important time to say as well that although we've talked about the cutting metal and the finished product, like the artistry in what you do is the design of it.
Yes.
The engraving side is just your way to put that design on different medium.
That's it.
Which is what was really interesting to me as we get into the American Scroll side of things, because on the face of it, and you're obviously going to go into this much further soon, on the face of it, you'd be like, oh, it's merch, it's t-shirts that represent your brand. But continue.
Yeah. So early on in this conversation, we said there are paired disciplines. And so you're learning the technical ability, but you have to bring the artistic ability alongside that if you want to do something that's world-class, right? I'm not saying that I'm world-class, but I'm saying if you want to do that, these are the requirements. You can't be just a good cutter. You got to be a good designer.
Yeah.
And so I've studied the design, practiced it years and years and years. And so when we started doing the brand American Scroll, it's based on that scroll style and that scroll art that I've done for I don't know how many decades that is, but for 43 years.
Yeah.
And so it's just quite a while.
Yeah.
And so I've had a bit of practice at designing scroll in that genre. And so that's kind of what it's about. And so then it became evident to me that this is a really good vehicle to do a number of things. It on a personal level, and so we're talking about the business side of it, it has the ability to provide a revenue stream off of artwork that you do. Because when you're making one-off things by hand, you get paid one time.
Yep.
And then every time that thing sells, it brings a premium because of what you did to it.
Yeah.
But you don't
see that premium. But what it also gives is it gives other people that love your work a chance to buy into your work and to support you.
So
because not everyone's going to have a single action coat.
It only took me 40 years to figure that out. That, a lot more people can buy a T-shirt than can buy a heavily engraved gun. But so it's like, okay, so possible revenue stream from that. And then you start thinking about it in terms of the art. And it's like, well, guess what? This is pretty cool because people like this. And a lot of people, they're intrigued. But then when they hear the story of where this came from, the journey, the why it's there, what is this? Oh, it's like, wow, this is really cool.
It means so much more when they wear it.
Well, it does. And so, a guy drew this, right? So I draw stuff on paper, usually. There's several ways that we get images, but one of them is by drawing it on paper and then scanning it into a computer. And then my son, who is the digital magician, does all of the necessary things on that end. And then we actually print the shirts.
Yeah.
But what that does is it draws you in because you might not know anything about engraving. But when you hear the story about this, then you're like, your level of awareness is raised. And you may encounter in your town a guy that's engraved, or somebody, right? It's like, oh, that's cool. That's that stuff. I want to get something engraved. They don't have to come to me. They can go to whoever it is that they find wherever they live or whoever they're comfortable with.
Because you've just given them a little bit of insight into what engraving is, and everyone's wearing that.
Yes, and so the saying, a rising tide floats all ships.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
This Kate's one. Kate loves it.
So, and it's true. Because
this whole thing, We Are Makers, is built on that premise.
And I appreciate you guys. Thank you for that. Because when the level of awareness is raised and the appreciation for what we do with our hands is raised, that allows people to do that. And it's encouragement for them, because when I quote a price, if you have no reference, you have no frame of reference for what it takes to do that, then you might be like appalled. It's like, oh my God, I thought it would be $50, Well, it was, but that was in 1900s, So the hope is that through Scroll, one of the offshoots of that would be an appreciation, increased appreciation for an art form that is sort of indigenous to here, right? Yep. It's like the blues, or something else. I don't know, baseball.
Yeah, okay.
So it's an indigenous thing.
I feel you kind of sold it short a little bit there with the drawing, because that's not the only way you take your work to turn it into apparel design.
No. You mean stealing it off the internet?
Stealing off the internet?
Yeah.
You download stuff, don't you?
I thought we weren't going to talk about that. No, there are several ways. And so one of the ways that we arrive at a design is I will draw it on paper. In another way, my son and I were thinking, I wonder if this would work. And so we took a plate that had a bunch of random engraving on it, put fingerprint ink on it and tape, and lifted the design off, put it on a piece of paper, scanned it into the computer, and then boom. And so I'm wearing a shirt right now that has this design that's on here. Can I walk up to the camera?
Of course you can, absolutely.
Yeah. So this design that's on here was actually on a steel plate first. And so then it came from an actual engraving. So this is not necessarily a drawing that's turned into the digital world.
Wait, is this not the steel plate here?
Yeah, let me see. It's I had to put
I think it's this one.
Put my eyeballs on. Let me. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's this plate right here. And so let me get the light right on that where you can see it. But the design on the shirt came from the plate. So that's another way that we get it. So this design actually came directly from hand engraving. We've also done designs that are based on the prints that I did, the intaglio prints. A photograph of that. There's another one. I'm going to do a Paul Hamler and step out of the frame. I'll be back. Don't worry. It's just...
I got this cool thing to show you.
Yeah. It was the president calling. Yeah. So I said I wasn't going to do that, but I did. Okay. So image of a pumpkin. And so we were going to do our transfer thing with that. The cat is most annoying.
It's fine.
Yeah, I know. He's basically untrained. I know, yeah. Cat got your tongue? So anyway, it didn't work, so we took a picture of that, and one of our images is based on this, but it's a photograph of an engraved image that was put in the digital world, tweaked the way it needed to be, and boom, there you have it. And so we have several ways that images are taken. And so one of our the slogans that we have is from metal to thread, taking the art of engraving from metal to thread. And so you're exactly right. Many people can buy a shirt. Mm-hmm. A lot of people appreciate engraving, and I love it when people do. You know, they're like, when I used to do shows or I go somewhere, it's like, oh man, I could never afford that, but I love it. Mm. And I have so much respect for that because, you know, it's a person who knows that it's out of their reach. They just don't have the means, but they still appreciate it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they say that, and it's like, wow, it's cool, you know? So now for that person, the entry point is really affordable. Mm-hmm. They can have some of the art, and it doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Yeah. And it, you know, I hate seeing all these people going around without an arm and a leg. I'm like, oh, there's an engraving patron. But
maybe it's got a great pocket knife. It's all engraved.
Yeah, right, yeah. So
left-handed one.
Yeah. So anyway, that to say that you know, it works for us on a number of levels. And so taking the art of engraving from metal to thread, literally, because it sometimes goes from a metal plate to, you know, an image that's printed on a shirt. Sometimes it's drawing, but it's all based on the root of it comes from that, you know, American Scroll, my interpretation of what those guys did back in 1850, 1860, 70, whatever.
It's giving people a further snapshot of Weldon Lister.
Well, it is. It's the ever progressing, you know, mind. My son is very creative, and so we have a lot of fun brainstorming. Sometimes we get in trouble because it's easy to get into you know, a creative whirlwind and whatever. And we have a lot of ideas that we toss back and forth, and they're not all good. They're not all keepers. But the cool part is, you know, this is where we are right now with what we're doing. This is not where we're going to stay. This is not where we want to stay. And so we have plans to take this farther. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to talk about the specifics of what those are. But if I know, so that's for the next episode. Yeah. So when you come back, when you come back, and we have a chance to visit again, maybe some of those things will be accomplished, or we'll be closer, and we'll be going, okay, so now here's where we are. But we have a lot of big plans, and so it's not a one-trick pony kind of thing where it's not just this. I know that's sort of vague, maybe sounding. No,
totally, but equally that's why I did want to segue into this in the podcast, because people do merch as something to support their business, and that is great in its own right, and it's a really good way of supporting another income for your business. Mm-hmm. But there always felt like there was a bit of a deeper reason you guys were doing American Scroll merch. Mm-hmm. What would you advise other makers with regards to what this has given you? You know, it's created jobs for family just by doing this, which engraving didn't or wouldn't have. Obviously, it's created additional income streams, but you've had to think outside the box a little bit to do that. What did that whole journey look like, and what would you take from that to gift to other makers?
So in American Scroll, you know, I described how it started out. Mm-hmm. American Scroll incorporated the brand, which we trademarked, and we own the trademark on that. And so we own the right to use that name on apparel, and which I thought was fabulous. I was surprised it wasn't trademarked, and so we own that. So that's something that costs money and it takes time. And so there's a commitment, there's a level of commitment for somebody who wants to jump in. And so we weren't creating merch sales for Weldon Lister Engraving. Mm-hmm. What we're creating is a lifestyle brand that's based on the art form, the art of Weldon Lister Engraving. This is a lifestyle brand that has, right now, it's got graphic t-shirts and some caps and shoes and some stuff like that. That's not where it's going to stay. And so that takes a massive commitment. We're the first company that I'm aware of that has taken something like this, like engraving, and doing it on a massive scale. And so we're serious.
It's not something that's synonymous with big scale.
Not with what?
Engraving's not something that's traditionally synonymous with large scale.
Yeah. No.
It's traditionally synonymous with one of one.
Yes.
Exactly. And so it's like a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say it's not a merch business for Weldon Lister Engraving. American Scroll is a lifestyle brand that's based on the art of me. But it's also got a massive contribution from Billy.
Yep.
And the collective mindset. And so what American Scroll is, it's not, we're sitting in a room that's filled with equipment that we use to manufacture the stuff that we sell. We don't actually weave shirts, but the images that you see, we do here. And every shirt that we sell is done by us. And so
that was interesting for me to see as well, because so many people, I watched a fantastic reel, it was like 60 seconds long, of someone using Mid-Journey AI to basically design their whole fashion brand using a drop shipping company to do, and it's like that's cool, that has its place. There is people that have that place, but what's the longevity of that?
I don't know.
Whereas we're in your shop and you've got an age-old tradition to the point of like a rawhide hammer.
Yeah, right.
And then you've also got the printing stuff over here.
Right. We have both ends of the spectrum.
There's an investment in quality there and that's where the drop shipping t-shirt thing, and if it's just for merch, I totally get it and I get why people would do it.
Sure.
But where the negative connotation of like apparel brands and stuff does come into it, because there's so much of it that's of a lesser quality, or not that's of a lesser quality, but of quality doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Like it's about how little can I pay and how much can I get out of it. Right.
Okay, so thoughts on what you're saying are, we print shirts in an expensive way. So the equipment that we use is expensive.
And you own it.
We do. And we own it. And so if we have to work late tonight, we will,
Billy's in the background.
Billy's going, what? Who said work late? Exactly. I didn't say I was going to pay you. Right.
This very quickly just turned into an expose of...
Yeah. Child labor laws again. Yeah. Well, he is my child. And, I don't see much labor going on. So... Okay, you're reflecting.
Concepting.
Yeah. You're
pondering.
Yeah, pondering. Okay. Oh, good. Pondering. Ponder this. So, all that to say, there are a lot of ways that you can put an image on a shirt, and not all of them are conducive to what we do. And so we use a method that reproduces what we want to see. Yeah. And so we don't use inexpensive shirts either. We use good quality shirts, because the philosophy is this. I want you to have a shirt that you want to wear, that feels good, you like the image that's on it, so you wear it.
Yes.
It doesn't do our brand any good at all if you take that shirt home and it hangs in your closet and it never sees a light of day until it goes to the thrift store.
Yeah.
Okay? And so it's worth it to us in the long run to do things the best that we can do.
Of course.
With excellence. And so if that means, we use stuff that costs more money, okay, so we're in it for the long haul, and we're not buying, $2 shirts and silk screening them with an image and then selling them for $32.
Yeah.
There's a lot more that goes into it than that. It's a labor-intensive process.
You get control of everything.
Yes. And so, when you buy a shirt from us, we take your order, the shirt's made, and we ship it. It's not outsourced to anybody. We do have a couple of things that we have done for us Shoes are one, and then we do some scarves kind of things, bandana, do-rag, wild rag, whatever you call it.
Cool.
Yeah. So, those things are not done by us, but that is right now today when we're talking. Is it going to stay that way? Nope.
Right.
And so, as things progress, you do what you can and you build upon it. And so that's where we are in this process right now. It's taking what we have been given, and we're using it to the best of our ability, growing it, and by God's favor and God's grace, man, we're doing well.
Good.
So the advice that I have for somebody maybe that's me, that somewhere else is listening, is don't do it. Run. Don't say no. It's a bad idea. No, awful. Don't go there. No, I don't know. I think there's ultimate levels of motivation for all of us, and so for me, I kind of hit upon some of the ones that are really cool. That I think that it's like, hey, possible revenue stream. I own a lot of this company, and I don't get paid right now.
Right now. Delayed gratification is a massive thing, and if you're in the maker community, you need to understand it.
Exactly. And so I am sowing into this because it is building something bigger than what I am, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of cool, because my son walked out of the room, but it gives him a job. We've had other people that work for us. We have other people that work for us. And so it provides for them. Mm-hmm. And so to have the opportunity to take, something that you doodle on paper or maybe engrave on something and create a company out of that actually makes money, man, that's insanely fabulous. That's cool. Like, where do I sign up? So is it the easiest thing to do? No. Is it the cheapest thing to do? No. Selling merch for your brand is a cool thing. So if you guys have your own t-shirts, and it advertises who you are and what you do. And that goes on. Mm-hmm. And I think it's wonderful, because go out, when you're out in the world, look at the number of people who wear t-shirts. Mm-hmm. And they almost always have something on them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or if you're in Scotland, jumpers, because it's cold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hoodies and jumpers.
Right.
Yeah.
But you wear it.
Yeah.
And it's got a brand on it.
Yeah.
And so
it's my favourite shop.
Yes, Bass Pro Shop. I was literally in Bass Pro Shop. I was like, Bass Pro is amazing. I don't have one of these back home in Scotland. So guess what I picked up? A jumper that had Bass Pro in it.
Gotcha.
Everywhere. Shannon and Bill Oyster gave me a cap.
Yeah.
It's just got oyster, bamboo fly rods on it.
Right.
It's a waxed canvas hat. Fits good. Mm-hmm. How many people are going to see this podcast
and go
with oyster written on the front of it?
Absolutely. And Bill is a fabulous person and a great engraver, and I'm proud to know him. There's my PSA for Bill. Yeah. So I'm glad to see you wearing that hat. And so, but it's cool because, Bill obviously sees the value in it. And so, and it's a good starter point, It's like, hey, what's that?
But again, what you were saying, like, some people can't afford the rods, but they can afford a hat, and they like the brand, so they want to wear it and support it.
Yeah, I can't afford to go and do a $3,000 course to make a fly rod that I may or may. I'd love to.
Yeah,
I would love to.
Right.
But I can't afford to do that.
But
I want to support that business because I love what they're doing.
Yeah. You love what they're about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you love what they're about.
Yeah.
And so, in what you guys are doing, everyone's got a story, and that's what you're doing is you're packaging it so the people that don't know can find out.
Yeah.
And there's value in that.
Yeah.
And again, I thank you, but I thank you again, because really cool for you to take the time to do it.
I think so.
And get the word out. Yeah. Yes, it is. And so you guys are doing a very similar thing to what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. It's startup. It's relatively new, although you've been doing it for a while. Mm-hmm. But you're not what you're going to become yet.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the chrysalis with the moth or the...
Yeah, we've been talking about this.
Butterfly. Yeah.
I really think that, and again, I'll sound like a broken record, for anyone who's listening to these podcasts chronologically, I've probably said it in every second one. Mm-hmm. Like this trip, Edition 6 launch, which was launched like the day we left for this trip, and this trip, I think will be the time we look back at the turning point of this becoming a thing and a self-sustainable thing.
I hope so.
And you know what? So what's really apparent here with the American Scroll thing is you're building it into something bigger than you. You're building it into a brand.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's something I feel a lot of makers can take away from.
Okay.
You know, they're not like a potter does amazing pots or does amazing leather work or does like whatever they do. They're not just that. That can be built into a brand. And like you so rightfully said, it's not only able to provide for you.
Yeah, but others.
And I know you're not taking from it at the moment, but you will be able to because it'll be a bigger thing, but it's providing for others. There's it's breaking down these barriers of how are you going to make money doing that?
And that's the thing, you know, creating a revenue stream, like you know, we've said, I hate to whip a dead horse, but as a maker, doing things one-off, I mean, I get a lot of money for my top-end stuff, but it takes a long time, and there's one of them. And sometimes it's a long time between paydays.
Yeah.
And I have people that wait patiently, and I'm thankful for them. But they want what I do, and they wait. And they wait. And, you know, and finally, you know, their piece is done, and they have it, and they're happy.
And there's also so many people that want what you do that can't have the engraving.
Well, and that's absolutely true too. And,
which is something that this American
provides,
Scroll fills.
Exactly. And so building something, what I wanted to do, and it became more apparent as we went along with it, is creating something that has a life outside of me, right? So what I see is this brand becoming a thing, and I'm part of it, but I'm not all of it.
Yeah.
And so what I hope to do is breathe the life into it. Here's where we started, and we have no idea what it may become. I predict that it will become huge. But you know,
Do you think that's what your dad done with you all those years ago?
do what?
Do you think that's what your dad done with you all those years ago? You know, in that very simple statement he made of, I can show you everything, it's up to you what you take from it. Do you think that's now recirculating? Like you've, in a different light, like you've done everything not everything you can do, I know you're always trying to be better, but you've done the engraving bit, and now it's like, let's see where that flies in the apparel
It's an
business.
amazing journey, and it's an amazing kind of segue into something that it's like, who would have thought, you know? It's like, it's really, sometimes it's like, I can only imagine what my dad would think if he could walk in here and take a look at what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I could say, hey, Dad, you know, we're taking this and we're putting it in there, and it comes out over there.
You'd be like, what?
No, it would be fabulous, because he would be going, oh, he goes, how about if you tried this?
Yeah.
Well, have you thought about this?
Yeah.
And I'd be going, no, but that's a damn good idea.
Yeah.
Let's do it. You know, let's try it and see. And so I'm not gonna ever claim to be the world's best businessman or the most visionary person or whatever. I mean, I have a lot of ideas, but there's one thing I'm not, and I'm not afraid to try something. Okay? And so whether this fails or succeeds, we're not scared to try. I'm not scared to try. We're giving it our best shot. Last year, we put Scroll on a NASCAR.
Oh, really?
Yes. And so we had the only scrolled up car that I know of. And so
good.
It was pretty cool. And so we got to go through all of that process, you know, creating the artwork and then going, I wonder what it's going to look like. And so guess what? Our scroll looks really cool when you blow it up and you wrap a NASCAR with it.
You got a picture of that?
I'll find you one.
Yeah.
I'll send you one.
Yeah, I'd love to share that with the world.
Have you seen it or not?
No.
Okay, yeah. So it was cool. And so all the sides, the hood, the back, I mean, it had stuff all over it. And it was a head turner. So
I'll bet.
We went to Texas Motor Speedway, and in the pits, the pit people who work all the races and see all the race cars, they were going, oh, that's cool. I want my picture with that car. And I had a guy tell me, he said, that never happens.
Because they're around it every day.
They see all of them. And so it was really cool on a lot of levels. And so we learned a lot from doing it. And but if we were tentative or fearful or scared, we would have never said that. So collectively, our board meeting was sitting around going, well, we have this opportunity. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And everybody's, yeah. I'm like, everybody wants to do it? Yep. I'm like, then we're doing it.
Let's do it.
We're in. We don't know what's going to happen, but we're in,
Nice.
So we did that. And that was pretty amazing. We did a barbecue sauce last year.
Did you?
Yes, we do. We have a barbecue sauce, and had an opportunity to work with a guy who's a former Army veteran, right, Bill? Smitty.
Yeah.
Army veteran, and developed this. And so you were talking earlier about private labeling stuff.
Yeah.
So we had a private label. We created our own label and had it bottled. And I'll give you a couple of bottles to drink before you go. But there again, it's like, man, this is like an obtuse angle for a company.
Yeah.
But not really. We're about the brand. We're about putting this on stuff and seeing what works and finding out.
Yeah.
And we're finding out.
Yeah.
And so the cool thing is people like it. We have several ways that we sell our product. E-commerce is a big one. And so we do that. We also have wholesale accounts that buy our stuff and they sell them. And so through that, we know that people like what we're doing or they wouldn't be buying it.
Yeah.
And so the question is, then how do you get it in front of more and more people? Mm-hmm. And so that's a conundrum for a small business. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of growing. And organic growth on social media or for a business is probably, I think, the best way to do it, because you can buy followers, you can buy this and buy that, but what you want is you want people who are hardcore supporters of what you do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're in the process of building right now. We're having people that like what we do, they follow us, they buy our stuff, and they wear it. Yeah. And we appreciate every one of them.
That's
we
great.
Really do. And it's fabulous. It's, I don't know, for a maker, it's kind of weird to think that many people buy your stuff. It's like sometimes it's very humbling. Because
especially when you've been used to doing one-of-ones. Yeah.
And then you're like, right now we're slammed with orders.
Good.
And it's so we, you always hear about businesses that start at the kitchen table, and ours didn't start at the kitchen table. It started in a small room in the house, and it grew out of there, and then it took over my shop. And so its next growth phase will be out of here into somewhere bigger, but we'll let demand drive scaling. Yeah. So scaling is just amping up the business to meet demand. And so we're not about, building a huge thing and then wishing we had some orders.
Yeah.
Where it's a delicate balance of,
very,
how do you not fail when you're doing that?
Yeah.
Because if you can't meet demand, then people are not happy.
Yep.
You want happy people that buy your stuff.
Yeah, I hear that. Do you know of any engraving orders that have come through, even if they weren't to you, but to other engravers that have come through, people seeing your stuff?
As far as other engravers, I don't know, because I don't know that anybody has said, hey, but I do refer because I get a lot of requests. And I can, my books are pretty much closed at this point.
Right.
It would be very, very limited commissions that I would entertain. I mean, I still talk to people, but I'm like, hey, here's the deal. It's this and that, blah, blah, blah. And most people don't want to wait that long.
Right.
Which is all okay.
Yeah, it's totally fine.
So depending on what they want, there are few people that I will refer to.
Right.
And send them, go talk to this guy or go talk to that guy. And,
But has anyone seen your merch, like your t-shirts and been like, their eyes opened to, oh, that's American Scroll, or that's engraving?
Yeah, feedback.
And then anyone come to you and then been like, oh, I seen it on a t-shirt. I'd actually would like to go and get something engraved and pocket knife.
Yes.
That's happened?
It has.
Wicked. So that's proven the concept. Mm-hmm. You've shown people because of that.
Exactly. And so whenever we get a chance to share, especially when we're in person, there's always, because I take the photo books along and we'll show people, because there's more than, Billy and I. Usually it's a bunch of us. And so if somebody's interested, they'll say, hey, well, here's where it comes from. Here's the book, here's the art that
it's a conversation
turned
starter.
Into these things. And then when people find out, they're almost always are like, wow, that's cool,
Yeah.
And does everybody buy one? No. But a lot of people do.
Yeah.
That's great. That's wicked.
So it's been a fun experience, and where it ends, I have no idea. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen, but
I'm excited to see it.
It's fun. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. I do. I appreciate that a lot. And,
are you sure we can't tease anything out of you?
As far as where we want to go,
you don't have to.
So I think, I can
push buttons.
I can. Where do we want to go, Bill?
Scotland sounds nice.
Yeah.
Infinity and beyond.
Open our first store in Scotland.
Back to the future. So we have plans, and so part of it is bolstering the distribution network, and that way a brick and mortar at some point. And where that's going to be, we're not really sure at this point, but location is very important.
Yeah.
We have other brand ideas that fit under the umbrella of American Scroll that we will be able to launch.
Great.
And take, there are several. And one of those, American Scroll is, I won't say it's gun-based. It's not. It came from that origin. But we do have some gun things.
Yeah.
And that's not okay everywhere. Everybody doesn't like that.
Yep.
And I respect that. And so that's okay. So we have another brand that we're going to do that is more high-end fashion.
Okay.
But it's still based on the art form.
Right.
So we'll take it in that direction. And then, we have a Old Amigo brewing company that we're working on. And so it has a fascinating story behind it that I shared with you earlier.
Yeah, you did.
And so it bears watching and exploring. And so
Amazing.
We're going to milk that cow for all it's worth. So that's another direction that we can go. But so we have a multifaceted approach, and you met our business partner Darren, and
nice guy.
He's super nice,
really nice,
very, very, very smart businessman. And so one of the things that he always encourages me with is, you guys are amazing because you don't stop creating. He goes, a lot of companies fail because they come out with one really cool product and then they have nothing to follow it up with.
Yeah.
Motorola failed on that, didn't they? They released the Razor, which took off, and I'm sure the story goes that, and if I'm butchering it, fine, jump in the comments and tell me I'm butchering it and tell me the right story. But
I don't know what he said, but it sounded cool, so it's okay.
The CEO of Motorola at the time, when they launched the Razor phone, the real thin flip phone, and that skyrocketed. It was super, super popular. First mega, mega popular phone before iPhones. And I'm sure he lost his job 6 months later because they didn't have a follow-up product.
Yeah.
Because they had nothing to continue that growth.
The momentum was lost.
So they got all this momentum, and nobody had thought, what happens if we get that momentum?
What happens if we're successful?
Yeah.
They planned for failure.
Yeah.
So
They
what looked
planned
on
for
the
success.
surface like a success story actually was his downfall. And I'm sure that's the story. And I apologise if I've butchered it, but that's what I believe. And it's a good story. Even if it's not true, it's a good story.
Yeah, there you go. And that's what we're about. We're about good stories.
Good.
but exactly where we are. And so we're not, American Stroll is not a one-trick pony. So, which is great because we have a multifaceted approach. We're not scared to take some chances and explore new things and new places to put this kind of stuff. And so it's exciting.
I'm excited for it.
Yeah, so that's a whole wrap up. Initially, the first question that you asked was, who is Weldon Lister? And so Weldon Lister is this guy that was a young kid that learned how to do this art, but he's not satisfied with just doing that. Mm-hmm. He wants to see how far he can take it and how far it can go and what it can become. So we talked off camera about Guy Clark, songwriter, fabulous Texas artist, but fabulous songwriter. Many, many people have recorded Guy's songs. And so he did this one, and the synopsis of the song is about a kid with a cape that's jumping off of the garage because he thinks he can fly. Well, there's a line in that song that says, he did not know he could not fly, and so he did. He believed in himself, right? He did not know he could not fly, and so he did.
He tried.
So yeah, you just got to let that soak in for a second. Yeah. He believed he could. Because if you believe you can, I think that's 99% of the battle. If you don't think you can, you never will. And it doesn't matter if it's engraving or doing any other thing that takes time and effort to learn. You got to believe that you can. You got to allow yourself to believe in yourself. And so, who am I? I'm a guy that believes I can. I'm just dumb enough to think I can. Dumb enough to try. And
you're doing a good job.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely way to wrap it.
Yeah.
But before we do wrap it,
yeah, if you thought about my last question.
Is there anything that you want to cover that we've not covered?
To cover up? Yeah, we need to erase most of that. Yeah. This is the biggest bunch of baloney. They're like, man, that guy's not worth a crap as an engraver, but he's a heck of a fertilizer salesman.
Not at all.
So if you've not got anything that you want to cover, Kate?
Yes. What advice would you give your younger self?
Well, I never was young, so I don't really know. Okay. Advice I would give my younger self is I'd have to think about that for a minute. Enjoy the ride. Just enjoy it.
It's a good one.
It's going to be okay. There's going to be some bumps, but just give it all you got. Don't hold back.
Like
Love it. Weldon, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for your time.
Not just for this, but yesterday we had such a good day. We didn't get back till whatever time at night in the Airbnb.
The wee hours of the morning.
Which Kate happened to unknowingly book an Airbnb that's like 3 doors down from you.
No, that's fabulous. We didn't even know it existed.
Exactly.
So.
And we got in last night just super hyped about the day and struggled to go to bed because of it. So.
Oh man, we had a fun day. It was a lot of fun. We covered a lot of ground. Saw a lot of Texas and went to Lukenbach and
that was cool.
You got to see Lukenbach and
somewhere that people should check out if they're in this neck of the woods.
Yeah.
I heard the song.
Yeah, you got to hear the song.
We ate barbecue. All in all, pretty good day.
It was a very
it was good.
Good friends, good people. Just looking at the beauty of the Texas Hill Country in the spring. So,
in the words of
a great day.
Andy Spoon Customs, there are small ships, there are tall ships, but the best ships are friendships.
That's it.
It's a good one, huh?
We'll wrap it up on that, eh?
Yeah. Thank you.